Nyota was not like the other children of Ndugu village. She did not run with them across the dusty fields or shout beneath the mango trees. She was quiet, often watching the sky with a look that unsettled the elders, like she was searching for something too far away. Her eyes were the color of river dusk, and in them danced reflections of stars that had not yet risen. Some said she was born under an omen, that the moon hung low and read the night her mother screamed her into the world. Others said she simply had the soul of water, slow to boil, quick to swallow. Her mother, Amani, had been a gentle woman with strong hands and a voice that turned lullabies into spells. She died when Nyota was just 8 years old, taken by a sickness no herbs could touch. It was after that night of weeping that Baraka, her mother's second husband, became her sole guardian. Baraka had once been a trader from the coast, a man with 1,000 stories and teeth that smiled even when his eyes didn't. At first he was kind, too kind. He cooked for her, plaited her hair clumsily, told her stories in a voice that always felt like it came from behind a mask. But Nyota never trusted him fully. She noticed things, how his gaze lingered on shadows, how he muttered to himself when he thought no one could hear, how he always knew what people feared most and used it like a knife tucked in his laughter. She spent more and more time by the river. It was her sanctuary, the one place he did not follow. She would crouch at the edge of the water, humming to the small silver fish that darted near her toes. Sometimes she whispered secrets to them and they listened. At least she believed they did. The reeds seemed to part for her. Her fingers, though thin, were deft, and she wove those reeds into tiny figures. Crocodiles, birds, even women with long flowing hair. Some of the villagers began to notice. An old man named Kondo once told her, "Child, your hands speak the language of the river. That is not always safe." But Nyota only smiled politely and went back to her weaving. The river understood her in a way the people did not. It did not ask her to explain herself. It did not tell her she was too strange or too silent or too deep. Her figures began appearing in strange places, on doorsteps, at the base of trees, floating in bowls of water without ever having been placed there. Some were afraid. They whispered that she had become something else, that grief had carved her open and let the river inside. "She's too close to it," they said. "One day it will take her." But no one stopped her. Fear is a quiet jailer. Baraka, for his part, began to change too. As Nyota grew, her hair longer, her silence deeper, he began to avoid her eyes. He called her names when he thought she couldn't hear. He forbade her from singing. He cut down her reed dolls when they began to appear in their yard, accusing her of bringing spirits into his home. She didn't argue. She only turned and went back to the river. The water, wide and slow, never scolded her. The crocodiles that sometimes surfaced never opened their jaws when she came close. Once, she reached out and touched the snout of a great one, and it blinked at her before sinking back into the current. No one else saw, or perhaps they refused to believe it. Nyota never told. At night, in the thin-walled hut, she heard Baraka pacing, whispering to whatever darkness filled his hollow heart. Sometimes she dreamed of teeth. Sometimes she dreamed of being the water itself, slipping between roots, swallowing light, forgetting pain. She would wake and find her pillow wet not with tears, but with river water. She didn't know how it got there. Children her age began to avoid her. Their parents told them not to talk to the girl with the river eyes. Some obeyed, some didn't. One boy, Juma, had once tried to hold her hand. The next day, he broke out in a fever and spoke only in fish sounds until his grandmother bathed him in salt and prayer. After that, even the brave ones kept their distance. Still, she did not cry. Not until she was alone, beneath the wide sky, feet dangling in the murky green, where the moon was not always kind and the stars did not always listen. There, sometimes her shoulders shook, but no sound came. Only the wind knew the shape of her grief. The river gave her nothing in return. No promises. No protection. Just the soft hush of its flow and the occasional glint of eyes beneath the surface, watching. Not threatening. Just waiting. Nyota began to wonder what it would be like to become water, to leave her name behind and let the current carry her somewhere else, somewhere quiet and cool and dark. She never said these things aloud. But the fish knew. The river knew. And perhaps, somewhere deep within his pit of secrets, Baraka knew too. And that was the part that scared him most. Baraka was not a man who took kindly to being ignored. At first, when Nyota began to spend more time by the river than in his presence, he dismissed it. Let her play with fish and weeds, he told himself. Let her wander with bare feet and glassy eyes. But over time, something in him began to twist. He watched her from the shadows of the homestead, and what he saw began to fester like a wound. The way the reeds seemed to lean toward her when she approached, the way birds circled above her but never above him, and worst of all, the way she returned from the river with a calm he could never break. Baraka hated peace. Peace was a mirror that showed him what he lacked. And in Nyota he saw something he could not crush. It frightened him more than he would ever admit. He began forbidding her from going near the water. "It's no place for girls," he said, voice full of grit. "That river eats souls." But she said nothing. She only looked at him with those still, starry eyes, eyes that had watched the world lose her mother, and now watched him try to lose her too. She obeyed him for a few days, staying near the house, gathering firewood, keeping her silence even when he muttered cruelties under his breath. But the river pulled at her. Not with force but with longing. Like a lullaby hummed from far off, calling her back to the only place that still felt like hers. So she disobeyed. She waited until his snores echoed through the walls, then slipped out barefoot under the moonlight. Her steps were soft, her breath shallow. She walked as though the earth itself might betray her. But the grass parted for her, and the night insects did not stir. When she reached the river's edge, she dropped to her knees, letting her hands glide into the water. The fish came to greet her, silver slivers of moonlight wriggling through the reeds. She wept just a little. Not for fear of being caught, but for the feeling of home she could not explain. For the mother she could no longer speak to. For the girl she might never fully become. The next morning her absence was discovered. Baraka said nothing to her directly, but his mouth was tight and his hands were fists even when empty. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence was the kind that screamed. Days passed. Then one day Nyota came back from gathering firewood and found smoke in the air. She smelled it before she saw it. The smell of burning reeds. She ran to the clearing behind their hut, where she kept her dolls hidden beneath a cluster of stones and roots. Her little family of woven spirits, her secret offering to the river. They were gone. All of them. The ash was still warm. Blackened strands of reed curled in the breeze, rising like ghosts from a shallow grave. Baraka stood nearby, leaning on his cane, a smile carved into his face like a wound. "You want to speak to spirits?" he said, voice low, barely above the crackle of dying embers. "Let them speak through smoke." Nyota stood still. Her heart did not beat faster. Her tears did not come. She only stared at the heap of burned offerings, her face as unreadable as the river during flood season. Baraka wanted her to scream, to beg, to crumble. But she did not. And that quiet, her refusal to break, only fed the fire growing behind his eyes. He turned and walked away, laughing to himself. She remained there until the wind turned and the last ember died. That night she did not sleep. Her hands were restless. Her eyes remained open. In the dark, she rewove the memory of each doll from air and memory, from sorrow and river breath. They would never return. But the river remembered. And Baraka, though he didn't know it yet, had made a mistake that could not be undone. Baraka waited 3 days after burning the dolls before making his next move. He was careful now, precise, his smiles more frequent and his voice dripping honey. He offered Nyota fruit in the morning, nodded politely when she passed, and even praised her sweeping one afternoon with a grin that didn't touch his eyes. She didn't trust it, how could she? But she said nothing. She moved like a ghost through the house, eyes lowered, hands busy. If the storm inside her raged, she never let it show. Then, one evening as the sun dipped low and bled gold over the land, Baraka approached her with a strange softness. "Come," he said. "I've been cruel. You were only missing your mother and I," he sighed, placing a hand to his chest. "I lost her too, you know." Nyota did not answer, but he continued. "The river, it was hers. Yours. I was wrong to keep you from it." He gestured toward the path. "Let us walk. Make peace." She looked up at him, studied the twitch at the corner of his mouth, the twitch in his fingers. Something in her chest stirred uneasily. But she followed him. They walked in silence, twilight curling around them like a veil. The river ahead shimmered with fading light, reeds swaying as if whispering secrets too soft for human ears. The air smelled of wet earth and coming night. Baraka's hand trembled at his side. He talked as they walked, about the past, about her mother, about dreams he never had. Nyota did not respond. She only listened as she always did. When they reached the riverbank, she stopped. He did not. He turned to her then, slowly, and his eyes held a strange gleam. "You were always too much like her," he said, and the honey in his voice soured. "Looking down on me with your silence. Your river. Your whispers." Nyota's breath stilled. "I tried to love you," he hissed. "But you," his voice cracked. "You make even the river disobey me." Then, with a force he had hidden in his bones, Baraka lunged. He seized her by the wrist and dragged her forward. "Let the river take you since you love it so much," she cried out, not in fear but in disbelief as his grip tightened. She struggled, but he was strong, driven by something more than hatred now. He pulled her to the edge of the river, lifted her as though she were weightless, and shouted into the dark, "Take her. Take this cursed child." And he threw her in. She struck the water with a splash like a broken prayer. For a moment all was still. Then the river churned. Not with current or wind, but something older. Something deeper. The surface split, foamed, and hissed. Baraka took a step back. From the depths rose a shape, massive, scaled, gleaming wet under the dying light. A crocodile. But not like any the villagers had known. This one was ancient, its eyes gold with time, its ridged back like the armor of gods, its presence a storm of silence. Baraka stumbled. "No," he whispered. "No." The beast turned its head and looked at him, not past him, not through him, but into him. Then it slipped beneath the surface. The water calmed. The reeds stilled. The river went quiet again. Nyota was gone. Baraka stared into the calm, breath ragged, eyes wide. Behind him, unseen, a single villager had watched from the trees. He did not run to help. He did not speak. That night, word spread like smoke. Nyota was dead, taken by the river. Some claimed it was an accident. Others said it was a sacrifice. No one mentioned Baraka by name. They mourned in silence, laying petals along the water's edge, whispering Nyota's name into the dusk. No one spoke of the scream that had been heard earlier. No one asked why Baraka did not return that night. They simply bowed their heads and waited. The river too waited. In the weeks that followed Nyota's vanishing, Baraka's life took on an uncanny luster. Where once his garden yielded sparse, sour fruit, it now flourished with bursting yams and fat, glistening guavas. His goats grew heavier, their milk richer. Strangers came from far-off places to trade with him, placing polished stones and silver trinkets into his open palms. His clothes changed too, no longer the patched rags he once wore, but crisp robes dyed in rare indigo, patterned like river waves. He walked through the village with the slow, deliberate confidence of a man favored by fortune. But it was a fortune that smelled faintly of rot. Some said the spirits had rewarded him. Others whispered darker things, that he had given something precious, something innocent, to the river, and the river had paid him in kind. But no one said these things aloud. They watched him, and they watched the water, and they held their tongues with the tightness of mourning. The river, however, had changed. Where it once danced in sunlight and sang against the stones, it now brooded in silence. The sparkle was gone from its currents. Its surface, once dappled with fish and reeds, now lay smooth and gray, like a closed eye. The fish were the first to vanish, one day plentiful, the next day gone. Fishermen returned with empty baskets and furrowed brows. The herons stopped visiting. The frogs ceased their chorus. Even the insects seemed to hum lower, like they feared waking something. Children, ever the first to see what adults refused to believe, began to whisper. They said that just after sunset, if one stood by the bank and looked across the water, a girl could be seen walking. Not walking on the road or even by the reeds, but on the river itself. Just a shadow, they said, gliding above the glassy water, hair long, arms by her sides, her eyes full of stars. They said she did not speak, only looked. Sometimes toward the village. Sometimes toward the trees. Sometimes toward the place where the river turned deep and dark. "She's waiting," one child whispered to another, clutching a grass doll that resembled Nyota more than they realized. "She's waiting for him." But the crocodile, great and ancient, was never seen again. Not a ripple hinted at its return. Not a single claw print appeared in the mud. Only the quiet and the absence, and the heaviness that lingered like a second sky. Baraka, for all his outward ease, avoided the river now. He walked the long way to his garden, never crossing the bank where he once stood. He moved with confidence, but his eyes darted. He jumped at shadows. He cursed at mirrors. He claimed to sleep well, but neighbors heard him shout at night, fragmented mutterings about teeth and eyes and water that breathed. Once, a group of young boys dared each other to leave a reed doll on his doorstep. The next morning, the doll was gone, but in its place lay a wet footprint too small for any man and too perfect to be from an animal. Baraka said nothing about it. But the very next day, he sent for a traveling priestess to bless his home. The villagers gathered outside while the woman burned herbs and whispered protections in an old tongue. When asked what she saw, she only replied, "You cannot shield yourself from what you owe." Still, Baraka thrived. or appeared to. His trade continued. His garden yielded. But he grew thinner. His skin dulled. His smile no longer reached his eyes, and his voice trembled when he said Nyota's name. Not that he said it often. No one did. But her name lived in the wind. In the whisper of reeds brushing together like prayer. In the hush of water that had once been song. And in the glances exchanged when dusk fell and the air shifted. Baraka's wealth became a wound the village could not look away from. Children no longer played near his home. Elders muttered as they passed. And though his hands were full, his nights were empty. Because even when the river is silent, it remembers. It began on a night thick with heat and silence, when even the crickets seemed to hush. The moon, pale and watchful, hung above the village like an eye refusing to blink. People said they felt something shift in the air, some weight moving unseen between trees and over rooftops, brushing skin like breath. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Dogs whined and refused to leave thresholds. Fires burned lower. In the house where Baraka lived, a window creaked open though no wind stirred. By morning Baraka was gone. No one heard him leave. No one saw him pass. But his absence was loud. The village stirred slowly, and word traveled fast as it always does when silence replaces a man so full of noise. A boy, fetching water at dawn, was the first to see it, at the bank where reeds whispered secrets and dragonflies once danced. There, laid out with eerie care, were Baraka's clothes. His finely woven robe folded into a neat square, his belt coiled like a snake beside it. His sandals sat just below, damp but not muddy. A silver bangle lay atop the pile, one he always wore, etched with sun patterns meant to bring protection. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle. Only his footprints, crisp and clear in the silt, walking straight into the river, and stopping where the water deepened. They did not return. A fisherman, old and nearly blind, muttered that he'd heard splashing in the night. Not the thrashing of fish, but something heavy, something that moved with purpose. And then, a voice. A girl's voice. Soft and low and cold as the river itself. "You cannot feed the water lies," he said it had whispered. "The river eats truth." Others scoffed, but their faces did not hold laughter. By midday the bank had drawn a quiet gathering. Villagers came not to search but to see. To confirm. To feel the air for whatever lingered. The children stood wide-eyed behind their mothers' legs, too afraid to peer past the tall reeds. No one stepped into the water. No one even knelt to touch it. They simply looked at the folded clothing, the empty sandals, the silver bangle now glinting beneath the slanting sun. The crocodile was not seen. But it was felt. Rumors rushed like floodwaters. Baraka had drowned. Baraka had run. Baraka had been claimed. The elders said little, only cast long glances toward the river and muttered prayers under their breath. But by that evening, someone had left a small bowl of honey near the spot where his footprints ended. The next day it was gone. No ants. No spillage. Just a dry ring in the earth where the bowl had rested. More offerings followed. A string of blue beads. A child's reed doll. A flower with petals the color of bruised dusk. No one admitted to placing them, yet each day brought something new, tokens placed with reverence and fear. People left them not just for Nyota, but for whatever had risen in her place. Whatever remembered. Whatever watched with eyes that glimmered not from hunger but from justice. For days the river remained unchanged, still gray, still quiet. Then came a ripple. Then another. Some said they glimpsed something beneath the water, too big to be fish, too smooth to be stone. A wide back, scaled and slow, gliding just below the surface. A shape. A shadow. But its eyes were not those of a beast. They were bright. Knowing. And some swore they shone like Nyota's used to when she laughed by the river, before grief took her voice. She came back, the children whispered to each other. She never left. She just went deeper. The village shifted. They stopped speaking Baraka's name, not from fear but from choice. His house stood empty, yet no one approached it, not even to take what he left behind. The crops he'd grown wilted. The goats bleated less. His wealth vanished like mist. Instead, eyes turned to the water. A new reverence grew. Quiet and trembling at first, then rooted like reeds. The river was no longer just a place for fish or washing or idle play. It had become something else, an altar, a witness, a memory with a current. Children were warned never to lie near its banks. Lovers began swearing oaths beside it. Elders offered prayers at dusk. And always the offerings continued. Each one a quiet apology. Each one a flower laid on the grave that was not a grave. They did not speak of what lived beneath, only nodded when others did. They did not ask why Baraka's bangle later appeared, weeks later, tangled in the reeds with scratches along the metal. They did not question the small handprint made of mud on the inside of the village well, dry though it had not rained. They only remembered. They remembered a girl who wept where fish listened, who wove dolls from reeds and spoke in whispers to the water. A girl whose sorrow did not make her disappear but transform. Not gone, only different. Not drowned, only deeper. And at night, when the moon was high and the frogs dared croak again, the river almost seemed to murmur, as if singing, as if telling the story all over again to any who would listen. The fisherman had never been a man of dreams. His nights were usually silent, broken only by the ache of his joints and the rhythm of crickets outside his hut. But one night, not long after Baraka's disappearance, he woke with a start, heart pounding, breath shallow as though the river itself had wrapped around his chest. He remembered every detail. She had risen from the water like mist, not walking, not swimming, but unfolding. Her form made not of flesh but of reeds, river light, and scales that shimmered like moonlit fish. Her hair floated around her like dark vines, and in her eyes burned something old, grief that had turned to purpose. She did not speak with lips, but with the hush of the current, with the sharp call of an egret, with the silence of a place that has been wronged. She asked for justice. Not vengeance, not blood, just truth. Remembering. She said, "Let no lie live where water flows. Let sorrow bloom only where kindness sleeps." Then she lifted one hand, and in her fingers was a braid, long and black and glistening. She wore it like a crown. Around her neck were small bones strung together with river thread, and her arms were circled with bracelets made of wet reed and shell. The fisherman had woken soaked with sweat, yet he wasn't afraid. He felt watched, not with cruelty but with hope. And when he went to the river that morning, he saw the water clearer than it had been in moons. Fish darted near the bank. Birds returned to drink. Even the wind felt different, gentler, less burdened. The villagers noticed too. Children who once had nightmares of Baraka's shadow began to sleep peacefully again. Women sang by the river as they washed their clothes. Men found their nets full where once they came back empty. The hush that had followed Nyota's disappearance began to lift, but not vanish. It became reverence. The river, they said, had chosen. They started calling her the girl in the water, though none dared speak her old name aloud near the banks. She had become something other than just Nyota. She had become what Baraka could never be, rooted in the truth of the land, reborn in the current, braided into the flow of life itself. But there were rules now. Children who visited the water with kindness were said to be protected. They told stories of a warm ripple encircling their ankles when they spoke softly, or of reeds parting to reveal shiny pebbles when they offered a flower. One child swore he fell into the river chasing a frog, and before he could panic, the water held him like a cradle and set him gently on the shore. When asked what he saw beneath, he whispered, "Her. She smiled at me." But the river had no tolerance for lies. One boy who had once mocked Nyota and later returned to the bank pretending to weep, came home fevered and unable to speak for 3 days. His mother begged forgiveness, placing a handful of salt and her own tears at the water's edge. Slowly the boy recovered, but he never lied again. Those who approached the river with falsehood in their hearts returned changed, quiet, hollow-eyed, some unable to eat for days. It became known, do not go to the river unless you are ready to be known. The crocodile had not been seen in full, not since the day Baraka vanished. But its shadow glided now and then under the surface. It moved more like a guardian than a beast. It did not hunt. It circled. And some who saw it swore it bore something new upon its brow, a single black braid that twisted like a river vine down its side. No one dared confirm it. No one wanted to be caught staring. In time, an altar of sorts formed at the place where Baraka's sandals were last seen. Not built by hands but grown. Reeds twined upward in a shape like open arms. Flowers never known to the village before now grew wild there, pale blue and bleeding red from the center. Some said these blooms smelled faintly of Nyota's reed dolls. The fisherman, the one who dreamed, returned often. He never spoke to others of what he'd seen, but he always left a fish wrapped in a cloth of his own weaving. And when he walked away, the water rippled once, as if acknowledging. The elders began teaching a new proverb: the water forgets no truth. They did not speak of Baraka. His house was slowly overtaken by vines. No one touched it. No one dared. But they remembered Nyota, not as the girl who died but as the girl who became. In every breeze that stirred the reeds, in every ripple that danced across the river's skin, they felt her presence. No longer sorrowful. No longer crying. She was the girl in the water. And she was watching. you said. The night was heavy with heat, the kind that clung to the skin like damp cloth. Crickets rasped lazily in the grass, and the river, ever shifting, whispered softly nearby. A half-moon hung low over Mbara as a group of village youth, some half-grown, others newly brave, gathered around the fire circle at the river's edge. They had begged for a story, the kind that twists into your dreams and walks beside you for days. The kind the old ones told only when the wind came from the east and the trees bowed their heads. The elder came slowly, leaning on his carved walking stick, the one with the hornbill etched along the side. His eyes were clouded but far-seeing, as if they had spent too long staring into places others dared not look. He sat with a grunt, motioned for silence, and began. "You think you are ready for truth," he said, voice like dry leaves. "But truth does not care if you are ready. Truth does not knock. It opens your door and walks in, uninvited." The boys laughed nervously. The girls shushed them. "You know her name," the elder continued, "though you are too afraid to speak it near water." One child whispered, "Nyota." The elder nodded. Stars in her eyes, voice like woven reed, a girl born of silence and river light. She should have lived a long, quiet life. But evil wears many faces, and sometimes the worst wears a familiar smile. He leaned forward, eyes catching firelight. Baraka. A man once thought charming. With eyes like still water and a tongue that could sweeten poison. He fed her to the crocodile. Yes, just as you've heard. But you do not know the end. Not truly. He looked up toward the dark water. Evil does not die. It sinks. It's judged. The children leaned in closer, breath held. After the river took Baraka, after his clothes were found folded with care like a ritual, things began to shift. The water ran clear again but never still. Always moving, always watching. Some say the crocodile wore her braid. Others say it was her, returned in skin not her own. I say this, rivers do not forget. One bold boy asked, "Was she angry?" The elder turned to him, slow and grave. "No, she was more than anger. She was just. That's why she was chosen. And that is why she still listens." With that, he took a small gourd from beneath his robe. It was carved with spirals and stars and sealed with beeswax. He uncorked it and poured a stream of milk into a wooden bowl. The children watched in silence. Then he walked, slow and bent, to the edge of the river. He knelt. "To the one who wept with truth," he murmured. "To the one the water claimed but did not consume. To the one who watches." He poured the milk into the river. For a moment nothing happened. The surface rippled, then stilled. The children fidgeted, unsure if the tale was over. Then the water trembled again, not from wind, not from a thrown stone, but from something below. A slow ripple pushed outward from the center, too even, too measured. Then they saw them. Two golden eyes. Not gleaming with hunger. Not wild. Just watching. Unblinking. Ancient. The elder raised his staff and tapped it once on the riverbank. "She sees," he said. "She waits." The children scrambled back from the edge. One girl let out a small sob. The bold boy had gone pale. The elder turned back to them, his eyes harder now. "You must remember, the river forgives slowly. It watches how you treat the soft-hearted. It listens when you lie. You think you can hide your cruelty in laughter or silence. The river hears." Another ripple spread, wide and gentle, as though some great body just beneath the surface had shifted slightly, still listening. The elder sat again, heavy with age. "Some of you will forget this tale by sunrise. You will think it only a story. But you will walk past the river and you will feel the air shift. You will hear your name in the rustle of reeds. And if your heart is cruel, you will feel eyes where no one stands. That is how justice lingers." He looked into the fire, the flames dancing like reeds in the wind. One day another will try to harm someone like Nyota. A girl too quiet, too strange, too gentle. And when they do, they will think the world does not notice. But the river will. He looked up, his voice soft now. It always does. Behind him, the water shimmered once more. The golden eyes were gone. But a single lily bloomed where the milk had spilled, glowing faintly under moonlight. It had not been there before. Its petals were white streaked with red, as if sorrow and truth had woven together one final bloom. The elder nodded once, then fell silent. No one spoke as the fire cracked low. And far across the river, deep where light does not reach, something swam with purpose. They built the shrine quietly, without ceremony or decree. It began with a single carved post, a spiraled staff of river wood, placed where Baraka's folded clothes had been found. Then came offerings, bits of cloth, polished stones, dolls made of reeds. Some left fish bones wrapped in leaves. others tears. The villagers of Mbara did not speak aloud what they knew to be true, but the river had become more than water, it had become witness. And Nyota, the girl they once failed to protect, had become something more than memory. Children were the first to kneel before the shrine. Perhaps because they had always known, deep in their bones, that rivers listen better than people do. They tied little braids of green reed together and whispered wishes into them before tossing them gently into the current. Some wished for peace. Some for courage. A few, quietly and without pride, wished for forgiveness. And the reeds floated for a time before sinking, as if the river chose when to carry a promise and when to bury it. Word spread beyond the village. Travelers who passed through Mbara heard of the girl who became the water's heart. They left tokens too: ribbons, coins, ivory rings. A few claimed the river gave back. One woman wept for her lost child at the water's edge and later dreamt of a girl wrapped in fish-scale light, who told her where to dig in the forest. She found her baby there, buried shallow by wolves but alive. Another man confessed, trembling, to cheating his brother. That night, his sleep was filled with reeds choking his mouth, a single braid of hair pressed over his eyes. He woke unable to speak for 3 days. When he returned and placed a carved apology at the shrine, his voice returned. They began to say, "She grants visions to the brave and drags liars below." But it was not fear that held them close to Nyota's waters, it was reverence. The river flowed clearer now, fish leapt from it again and birds sang by its edge. There was balance, like a breath held and slowly exhaled. And at the heart of that balance was the crocodile, not hunted anymore, not feared blindly. The elders said the creature had not devoured her, but merged with her. That in choosing to consume a soul unjustly condemned, it had also accepted judgment. The crocodile came to be known not as a monster but as a keeper. They painted it on the shrine wall, its eyes gold, its body coiled like a question around a girl with a reed crown. It was neither punishment nor mercy. It was consequence. Girls in the village began wearing reed bracelets braided in twos, one for truth, one for silence. They spoke less often but more clearly. And the boys learned to listen better, or at least to pause before mocking what they could not explain. The shrine reminded them all that water does not forget what it carries. In time, even those who had once doubted began to visit the shrine at dusk. They left stories scrawled on palm parchment, tucked beneath river stones. Some claimed to see her, Nyota, watching from where the reeds thickened, her hair long and damp, her eyes holding stars. One boy said he heard her laugh when he told a joke to the river, and a ripple answered him with perfect timing. Another, bolder, claimed he saw her braid a doll and place it gently into the arms of a fish. But never once did she speak. The silence was part of the shrine's power. The river knew what words could not mend. And so, the people began to change. The legend became law, unspoken but understood. Respect the river, speak your truth, and never fold your cruelty in neat clothes by the shore. For the drowned do not sleep. They watch. They balance the scale. And if you are kind, if your sorrow is real, they might even protect you. On the anniversary of her death, the village held a quiet rite. Not a mourning but a reflection. Girls walked barefoot to the river and released flowered braids into the current. Elders bowed their heads and told stories of justice carried not by blade or banishment, but by a girl who became the voice of water. That night, a crocodile was seen resting beneath the shrine, unmoving, eyes aglow like lanterns in the dusk. It stayed until morning, then slipped away, leaving only a trail of pressed reeds behind. They called it Legacy of the Drowned. But it was more than a tale. It was the reminder that in silence there is listening. In water, memory. And in consequence, a crooked kind of grace. You said. The fire crackled low, throwing shadows across the elder's lined face. The children leaned closer, their breath held between wonder and dread. One child, the smallest, looked toward the river's gleam beyond the trees and asked in a whisper, "Will she ever walk on land again?" The elder did not answer right away. He turned his gaze toward the moonlit current, silver and slow, as though it too were listening. His voice came softer than the night wind, worn with age and memory. "If she does, it will not be as a girl." They waited, but no more words came. Behind them, the reeds near the water's edge stirred, softly like fingers parting long grass, but there was no wind. No breath of air moved the fire or the leaves above. Only the river shifted slightly, as if something large and knowing had just passed beneath the surface. The elder placed another log on the fire and sat back in silence. The children did not speak again that night. But one of them, the smallest, thought they saw two golden eyes glint for just a moment beyond the reeds. Watching, not cruelly but with the quiet promise of memory that never lets go.